Gambling ads, are they just misunderstood? Are we missing the real problem that they're just not inventive enough? Would the public opinion be swayed if more followed Paddy Power's latest example, or is it too late? All this and more on the GI Huddle.
The Global Gaming Awards are powered by Gambling Insider, in association with G2E and lead partner BetConstruct. Spanning the entire gaming industry, both land-based and digital, the categories recognize operators, suppliers, innovation, and responsibility. The nomination process is designed to ensure the shortlist represents the industry's finest by featuring both self-nominations and an independent specialist nomination panel. These companies are then showcased in the glossy Shortlist magazine, celebrating the industry's best and distributed at G2E Las Vegas. Independent leading game executives, including many of the most recognizable names in the industry, cast their votes in each category. The awards climax at a gala luncheon during G2E Las Vegas, attended by hundreds of industry-leading executives. For more information, visit globalgamingawards.com.
Hello, and please mark this day in your calendar as it marks the very first time you will have heard the GI Huddle. We're delighted you can join us for our very first edition with myself, David Cook, and three other hotshots from the Gambling Insider editorial team. Here with me are North London's prodigal son, Tim Poole.
Hello, everyone.
Sporting a charming Northern Irish accent, it's Matthew Enderby.
Hello there.
And the pride of the North, Nathan Joyce.
Hello.
So to bring you on to the main premise of this very first discussion for the GI Huddle, what really got us thinking here at Gambling Insider HQ recently was when we saw Paddy Power's advert about how loyalty is dead and how they used Rodri Giggs, brother of former Manchester United and Wales footballer Ryan. And that's without going into the specific detail of what the joke behind that advert was. We'll assume that you've seen it and we'll assume that you know the backstory. But it's really just got us thinking about whether if more gambling ads went down this route, would they cause so much controversy? Would the general attitude, public perception to them be quite different? So I'll leave the first question really open to the floor and ask, are adverts like this generally a good or bad thing for the industry?
I think they're a good thing for the industry. I think it's a good idea to have like a different kind of offering. I think across any industry, the best ads are the ones that stand out for the storyline as such, not really the content that they're shouting at you, but it's about the story. It's about Ryan Giggs' brother walking through and having all these little links to what happened. And I think it's the same across any industry. If the ad stands good on its own, then it's valuable to the audience and valuable to the operator as a result.
Easy to agree with that. And on top of that, I'd say from a regulatory perspective, this advert barely mentions, I think in one edition of the advert, it doesn't at all mention the words gamble, casino, bet, or bet now, odds here, this offer. It's very subtle, and people who like to bash the industry might not necessarily even spot this as a gambling advert. So I think in terms of reducing the pressure on the industry, this kind of approach is the perfect one. Whether Paddy Power they may have hit a gold mine there from a regulatory perspective, we don't know, but I hope they catch on to that.
Yeah, so David said about these adverts being good, but I don't think we've seen an advert like this before. This advert is so niche. I think Paddy Power absolutely nailed it, but Paddy Power are known for doing quite rogue adverts, but I don't think we've seen anything quite like this, and I don't think we will see anything like it going into the future.
Yeah, just to follow up on that point, Nathan, about never having seen anything like this before, because I think that's exactly what the issue is in terms of seeing all these gambling adverts, that with so many of them, it's like we have seen this before. And particularly, we see lots of celebrity endorsement in other cases as well. Like we see Ladbrokes using various celebrities at the moment, like Chris Akabusi and James Buckley, and even seeing Bet Victor now using Harry Redknapp as well in their adverts. And it actually makes you think, if gambling adverts did vary in their style a bit more, would they have caused such an outcry? And is it actually more a case of people have got sick of them rather than people being worried about any effect they might have on any viewer?
I do think that's a fair point, but I think as well it's the frequency of these ads that quite often that irks people. They see so many ads coming through, and it's like it just seems like the same. I guess it relates in a sense. It's the same message being shouted at them again and again and again. These are a different odds, or something random from Harry Redknapp that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But I just think it's the frequency. So even in the US, we had similar reports of when DraftKings and FanDuel tried to really flood the market. People felt overwhelmed with just the number of these ads that are coming their way, and it just becomes quite exhausting to have to listen to it and sit through it all.
Again, not like I'm Matt's best friend or anything, but I'm basically agreeing with him once again. In terms of frequency, yeah, it's hard to say no to less adverts is better, and certainly less is more in terms of a quality advert.
I think looking away from the quality of the adverts, it's the amount of times we see it. So we expect a lot of these adverts to be quite cheesy and corny, especially the Ladbrokes ones with Dizzy Rascal and James Buckley. But it's the sheer amount of times you see it in between advert breaks. That's when it can become quite annoying. So I feel maybe we sort of expect these adverts to be a little bit cheesy rather than just doing the offers, which can be boring. But the more we see it, I think that's when we decide to grow a bit more of a hate for these particular adverts.
But you see, if I was to ask you guys, just off the top of your head, if I was to say, bet and play now, what comes to mind? Ray Winston, that's the thing. So that's an example where Bet365 have used so many in-play ads, so many half-time ads, that it's maybe not necessarily created a negative perception straight away, but it has really been through that repetition. But then that also makes me think, does everyone have to look at Paddy Power and think, let's be like them? Or the issue then is, how does an operator that's not Paddy Power create that brand identity without frustrating the general consumer who's so fed up with seeing all the adverts all the time?
So on that point, I think it's interesting to use the Paddy Power example, because sure, Paddy Power are known for these great adverts, for these catchy adverts, and they've had some bad ones, like anyone, but they've had some real gems down the years. But this particular advert, this particular idea, as Nathan said, it's a one of a kind. It was really out there. It's not necessarily a Paddy Power advert. Paddy Power have done it, but anyone could have done it. We've got Betway paying Saatchi and Saatchi for their new campaign, The Hunch. There's no reason these sort of multi-million marketing companies and campaigns can't be as good as this. There's no reason they can't be creative, they can't be innovative, and at the same time, like my earlier point, less in your face, so regulators and the general public and perhaps gambling naysayers can't give the industry such a hammering.
Yeah, going back to the point of Bet365, I mean, we're talking here that adverts have to be creative but more stylish in a way, but 365 have built such a big reputation, they can get away with just showing Ray Winston and the odds. They know that they're always going to get customers, and more customers come to them as a result. They don't need to be out there and they don't need to be flashy. They know what they are. They're one of the biggest in the industry. So for them just to use Ray Winston, and everybody knows straight away, if you're in a pub and you can't even hear the TV, you know straight away what it is, and you're expecting there to be odds, and then that can cause a debate between friends about that particular game or that particular market. So 365 have built up a reputation and have nailed it, and there's no real need for them to try and be corny and cheesy. And maybe Ladbrokes and Coral need to step away from that and maybe take a bit more of a professional sort of stance with their adverts.
Because, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the point of an ad is brand recognition, right? So regardless of whether it's good or bad, people are recognizing this is a Bet365 ad, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing. But I mean, if I was to ask you guys, have you seen anybody, despite the Paddy Power advert being perhaps controversial in its nature, have you heard anybody complaining about the ad, or do you know of any person that would have made a complaint about the ad, or any kind of negative feedback to an ad like that?
Potentially Ryan Giggs, but apart from him aside, no.
And anyone who's been in a similar situation to Ryan Giggs, and perhaps. But then it's like, if we saw all the ads being like that, and we didn't really see about the odds and the kind of the products that the gambling operators want to advertise, would that work at the same time, or does it really have to be about finding that balance between telling people what it is, or just simply doing something that people are going to remember, and do something that makes them remember a brand name?
I'm not sure that if someone like Ladbrokes or Coral use less odds and use less bet now, that'll be such a bad thing for them, because you have in-play examples where Harry Kane to score Nexus 3-1 and the whole of England's watching. That's maybe slightly different, and I'm sure everyone in this room can appreciate certain situations have certain needs. But the other day it was 12 p.m. and I saw Dizzy Rascal come on the screen for Ladbrokes, and I think it was advertising either casino or bingo. Now, does a bingo audience really need to see Dizzy Rascal? I think that's potentially a waste of marketing budget. I'm not necessarily an expert in that area, but Also, I've seen Harry Redknapp recently on Bet Victor. Harry Redknapp's everyone's favourite person at the moment, but do I need to see him getting locked out and calling Sandra? That's not going to make me bet. I don't think it'd make many people bet. So I think actually you could have less of that, and I don't think it would necessarily harm operators. Bet365, like you say, that's a good one. They don't need to be corny, and they do exactly what they need to do. Again, do they need to do it when a match isn't on? Probably not. Every situation has its needs.
On the flip side of that, and looking at it from a different angle, Ladbrokes we say is cheesy, but then we could all of us here could roll off who's actually in those adverts and how much they're annoying us. So in a way, it sort of sticks in your brain a little bit more. So maybe that is a positive effect they're going for. Maybe not reverse psychology or anything like that. But at the end of the day, we can describe in detail their adverts and who's in it. And at the end of the day, betting companies want you to remember who they are. And so you can argue that that's actually working for them.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really makes the Paddy Power ad stand out is that it fits into like the current public perception of gambling. It doesn't sort of, as Tim said earlier, it doesn't scream gambling ad, doesn't say all the stats and statistics all the way through it. It's a more subtle, nuanced way of saying, we are Paddy Power and this is, here's our loyalty program. And I think that with the current situation, with regulations all developing towards ads, I think it's important for operators to be pushing out more of these kinds, because you're still getting your name out there. People will recognize it and associate it with what you want them to, but at the same time, they're not hammering down that same message that we've heard again and again, and campaign and charity groups might say will lead to problem gambling and issues like that further down the line.
So you say for Paddy Power or any other sort of operators to produce adverts like that, but that advert was so niche and it was such a one-off. How do actually operators potentially go about that, and how do they pick a different angle? So say we're saying, for example, Ladbrokes and Coral are so cheesy and they need to make it a bit more professional or give it a bit more edge, like the Paddy Power Rodri Giggs advert, but how do they do that when that is such a niche example?
I don't know. Yeah, no, to be honest, that's the best answer I give right now. That's what their responsibility is at this point, I think. And the more the sort of public is against gambling, the more important it is for these operators to come up with a clever way of saying, here we are, this is our business, but don't worry, we're not overwhelming you with the same thing that you've heard for the last decade or however long. I totally understand where you're coming from there, but I don't have the answer.
Well, here's another example of an ad which seemed to me to generally go down quite well a couple of years ago. It was when Bet Victor brought out their advert where they said something along the lines of, we don't know what to do for our gambling ad. How about we just copy another typical gambling ad? And then it cut to people talking about bet and play, acca banter, lad, all this kind of thing. Let's assume it was perhaps a thinly veiled dig at the Ladbrokes Life adverts as an example. Is there maybe too much of a misconception, particularly in this country, just looking at the UK, as to what the average bettor is and how to target that particular group?
I think there certainly is with certain operators, and it's a great example you've made there, because that Bet Victor advert, we still remember it today because it stood out, and it was okay. It wasn't necessarily the most creative. It was just mocking its rivals. But the most recent Bet Victor advert I've seen is Harry Redknapp, and the exact opposite, and they've gone backwards. So sort of in answer to your point, but also in answer to Nathan's earlier question, if you saw a really good if Ronaldo sees a really good free kick and it's the best free kick he's ever seen, he's still going to try and score more free kicks. That Paddy Power advert may be the best one we've ever seen, but I don't think operators should use that as an excuse to put out anything, especially when it's such a precocious time where the more adverts you see, like Matthew says, the more bad reaction there could be.
So you brought up there the Bet Victor advert from a couple of years ago, which stands out, but since then Paddy Power have replicated that for their online bingo site. They actually got, I think it was a washed up EastEnders character, and they were like, Ricky, yes, yeah, they got Ricky in, and they were like, well, how are we going to advertise bingo? And again, the audience there they were trying to pick on was picking just trashy lights with the washed up star. So Paddy Power sort of saying there they knew what their audience were. They weren't high stakers or anything like that. But that's something which sticks in my memory for that as well. So,
but it really felt that when it comes to talking about gambling advertising, debating about gambling advertising in the UK. That really seemed to become a hot topic at the back end of last year. We had the FOBT issue, and it felt like that was the next step to talk about the ads. It does feel to me that since the self-imposed advertising ban coming in next season, where you won't be able to advertise in play pre-watershed, with the exception of horse racing. Do we actually think that, despite any kind of new ideas the operators come up with, do we actually think this whole issue might actually die down a little bit as a result?
I think with this ban, I think operators should just go a bit more hell for leather with it. At this point, if you can, in a couple of years' time, when you can pick and choose what exactly you want, so you can actually cancel out all adverts completely with your Sky packages and stuff. I think those which are allowed, the people who are happy to see them, it's giving you the freedom to just go and do what you want. So maybe we can see more from Paddy Power, from Ladbrokes and stuff like that. I don't think it will have too much of an effect on people.
Yeah, I think that whistle to whistle ban is kind of like the operators all teaming up and offering the sacrifice to the public, or public and politicians and whoever else as well, who are quite against gambling at the moment. And I think that it's not weak, but everything's done online now, right? That's where so much is coming from. That's where so much spending is going. And I think they know that's what's important. So they can say, we can remove a lot of ads from the TV, and it's probably not gonna, well, it will affect things, but in the long run, how much will it change things? Yeah,
exactly. You're exactly right there. The thing is, social media is now sort of taking over how many people do watch live TV nowadays. It's Netflix, Amazon Prime, and there hasn't really been a ban on social media yet, so operators can really target that with images, live videos, stuff like that. So it appears that operators may not actually be that bothered if a ban comes in, because they can target social media, which is where the digital age is now going.
I think you both raised some really good points there, and certainly we've had Mims Davis recently praising efforts from the industry, and I think that's mainly because of the whistle-to-whistle ban. But with what Nathan said in terms of going hell for leather, that's certainly an idea. In terms of we've had a consultant tell us that at Gambling Insider recently, and if certain people are always going to criticize gambling advertising, maybe they should just go for it. But just with the climate in Europe at the moment, with the bans, Italy obviously there's a complete gambling advertising ban. In Belgium, they've recently looked at things in terms of advertising. It's just it's a bit of an interesting time in terms of whether you really go for it or not. But I think something we've all talked about before is definitely certain situations and targeting certain adverts at certain times. So like Nathan says, if you're at the pub watching football, or if you're watching Sky Sports News, you'll probably expect a betting advert. But if it's the World Cup when the whole nation's watching, people might have been shocked to see so many, which they certainly were, which is ridiculous in itself, on ITV and BBC and things like that.
Well, online was mentioned there, and I think it was the study from Gamble Aware that showed that it was, I think, £1.7 billion spent on marketing, I think, for 2017, but a large chunk of that being online. And then when you've got the TV ads, it's like, we think about what happened with Sky Bet recently, and having a complaint upheld against them because apparently they were showing that an increased knowledge would entice people to bet more, as ridiculous as that sounds. And I've got to admit, if I was Richard Flint at Sky Bet, I would be so drained of energy at something like that, because he does so much in terms of going to different seminars and speaking at industry events about how responsible gambling is so important, and then they still get reprimanded. So it actually makes me think, comparing that to the type of attitude that Paddy Power has taken towards advertising at certain times, it does actually make you think they might as well just go on the attack, mightn't they, in their advertising? If people are just going to complain about anything, regardless of actually how responsible you try to be.
100%. I think that it gives the operators just a bit more of a license of freedom. Like you said, if they're trying to jump through hoops to make sure that they stay in line and sort of appease everybody, and it still hasn't worked, then why not sort of take more of a Paddy Power approach? Operators are always going to get judged for if an operator does something which is classed as funny, people are always going to say it's a rip-off or a spin-off of Paddy Power anyway. So, yeah, like I said, if they're just going to get marked down all the time, and especially with the Sky Bet one, then they might as well just sort of go and do what they want to do and get their name out there as best as they can.
Yeah, I think it was 2 complaints that came in and were upheld, and that was it. This ad can no longer be shown in its current format, and it's that sounds a bit crazy, to be honest. How many people will have seen that ad and maybe had not the best reaction to it, but still thought, whatever, it's just an ad, right? Like, turn over. But these 2 people writing in, taking the time to complain, has really sort of driven it on. So there is that possibility that they could sort of just push and continue and just say, you know what, people are always going to complain, so let's just carry on. But I don't know. I think with the way everything's developing at the moment, to do that, it's just going to really ramp up that sort of negative attention in a way. Sort of, if Sky Bet were to continue and just push out those same kind of ads again and again and again, there would be some mainstream publication that would be saying Sky Bet has 10 ads banned in the last month or something like that, and then that would just be another smear essentially on how they look.
Yeah, that's it there. You touched upon it. The 2 complaints. I mean, I'm not sure what other industry would receive 2 complaints for an advert and they receive so much backlash and so much sort of public attention for it.
Yeah, I mean, you guys make solid points, and the thing is, we're discussing it here, but there's so many industry debates. You go to ICE, you go to all G2E all over the world, and people will be, especially in Europe, people will be talking about advertising, and there's no necessarily right answer, and there will be those who say, yeah, let's go for it, and there'll be those who say, let's be more cautious. But at the end of the day, I just think with the pressure at the moment, I know, Nathan, you said that advertising is never going to be banned here, and I'd agree if I would agree with you from a logical point of view, but as we've seen, sometimes regulators, politicians in the UK aren't necessarily that logical, and you can just never put anything off the table. Like you say, 2 complaints for a Sky Bet ad, and it's banned. So, you know, it's just that time. If it was 10 years ago, I think you could say, yes, go for it. And I think a lot of operators did, which is part of the reason why we're here today.
So while gambling is still legal in this country, if advertising was to become illegal, I don't know how I could possibly react to that without swearing a lot, because that's just crazy, isn't it? I mean, if you're allowed to gamble, why is advertising that thing not allowed? Of course, restrictions in place, certain times of the day, that's all good. But if the act itself is legal, to make advertising it illegal, just, I can't even,
We'll stop him there before he explodes. But just as a point to sum up, where do we see the overall image of gambling industry advertising heading over the next 4 or 5 years? I'll start with you, Nathan.
I think they're just going to carry on doing what they're doing, but I think there's going to be a huge focus on social media. Gambling will never be banned in the UK. It's too big of an industry. Millions and billions of pounds go into it. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, it'll move on to social media, and then people will probably want to attack that instead, but we'll move on to that at a later date.
Yeah, I just think at this point in time, operators, just be smart with your advertising. This is why I love the Paddy Power advert so much, because I think, as I say, I could be wrong. There could be one complaint and that could get it banned, but I really don't think it's as in your face as other adverts. And I don't know whether Paddy Power realizes actually that it's hit a pot of gold here. And I think other operators should certainly not try and copy them, because we've already discussed they've nailed their brand image and branding. But I think other operators should be cautious, but be clever, be creative. Don't just throw out your Harry Redknapps and your Dizzy Rascals, because you'll have at least one person that will be happier sitting right here if you don't.
So yeah, no, both great points there. I think everything's moving online. I think the targeting abilities of ads online is far greater, and that will really benefit operators, really. I think that, you know, things like the Paddy Power ad are the way to go. Subtle approaches, nuanced approaches, and really just don't repeat it all too much. That's what really grinds people down.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today, but these 3 gentlemen don't just talk a good game, they write first-class analysis too. So please keep checking into gamblinginsider.com and our GI Friday newsletter. Plus, our March-April magazine is out now too. We hope you enjoyed our first huddle. See you again soon.